If you're an entrepreneur, you probably recognize that things are constantly changing, evolving, and especially if you've got that creative bug, you're always being called to get something new out. Well, my guest here today is what he likes to call a second-generation entrepreneur with a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of fire, and a lot of brilliant support for coaches and entrepreneurs all over the world. So I'll introduce him in just a second. But if we're new friends, let me just say hi. I'm Melanie Benson, and I'm known as America's leading small business optimizer. And in this podcast, I like to bring guests on who are going to reveal what it's like to really make it successfully. What are they doing to optimize their business? And what can we learn about their mindset and the habits and strategies that are helping them make it to the top and beyond? And today I have a guest who I just adore. I've known this man for a really long time, and I got to tell you, he is a creative genius, but he's also really, really transformational. He is one of these people who, like all of us, we're constantly evolving, but he's learned how to master that evolutionary state and really continue to bring powerful programs that just do so well in the market. So let me introduce you to my friend Michael Port, who I'm sure you have heard of. He's called the Uncommonly Honest Author by the Boston Globe and a marketing guru by the Wall Street Journal. Is a former professional actor, which I have happened to see a few of his shows that he landed on, and author of 5 best-selling business books and founder of the Book Yourself Solid School of Coach Training, and also Heroic Public Speaking. So, Michael, it's so great to connect with you again. And such a funny story. We're both in this hotel in Long Beach for completely different reasons.
Yeah.
Michael's walking through the lobby, and I'm sitting there having a conversation with some friends. I just wrapped up the women's conference here in LA, and I'm thinking, God, that guy looks familiar, but it couldn't be Michael Port because he's on the East Coast. Sure enough, we just kind of bump into each other.
2 ships passing in the night.
I know, but it was so awesome to, just randomly run into somebody on a completely opposite side of the U.S. So
it was good to see you.
Nice.
And I'm happy to be here now, so thank you. No matter how many opportunities I have to speak to people, I never take it for granted. I just feel super lucky to have the opportunity to have a platform to be of service. So I thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm excited to dig in today because, you're in the midst of another evolution, and I'm just loving what you're doing with it. But before we get into that, let's hear a little bit about Michael and what got you into this work. I mean, you're a professional actor. You were on Sex and the City, and I don't even know how many other shows. I'm sure you have a list, but you were in a completely different field. And not only did you leap into a totally different field, but you've had a couple of pivot points along the way. Why don't you share with us what that's about for you?
I was a professional actor. I went to the graduate acting program at NYU, and I got a master's. And then I went out and worked for about 4 or 5 years. And I loved the work, but I hated the lifestyle. I don't use the word often, hated, but I really did. Part of it was that I wasn't mature enough to wait. I've never been accused of having any patience. So I didn't grow into patience necessarily, but I've now figured out how to control more of my future than I did then. So I felt like I had to sit around and wait for people to give me jobs, and I didn't like that idea. And I left. And I do think that leaving acting was one of the worst decisions that I made professionally. And I don't have a lot of regret. I'm not opining for the days of yore, but I was young, and I really was at the cusp. I was right at that tipping point. And what it taught me was how to hang in there when you're at the tipping point. Because as an entrepreneur, you struggle, you're in the trenches, you're digging it out, and you feel like it's just not going to work. It's not happening. I want it to happen now. My plans require that it happens now. But if you just hang in there, usually you can tip. So I don't give up now in the way that I did when I quit acting. Doesn't mean I don't stop things that I don't think are working, but that's different than giving up. So I left the business and I talked my way into a job in the fitness industry for which I was completely unqualified. But I told them I was unqualified, and I gave them my pitch. I said, here's why I think you should choose me. And then I spent 5 years in that industry, and then I went on out on my own. But what I realized was that I could take what I knew as an actor and I could apply it to all sorts of other situations. It wasn't just something that I could use to create characters in a play or a movie. But when I went in for that first interview for that job in the fitness industry, I was applying for like a middle management job. Again, no qualifications. I didn't have the certifications that they wanted me to have. I was going to run the whole exercise department. And I just liked health. I just was into, working out. So I thought, that's fun. I'll do that. But I played the character. I looked at it and I said, how can I play this role in such a way that I would nail it, that I'd steal the show? And I started to look at developing myself for the interview, the way I would develop a character in a play or a movie. And what's interesting is that oftentimes when people think about acting, they think of it as something that's inauthentic. So if I'm teaching performance, people get nervous. They say, I don't want to be phony. And the truth of the matter is, and you know this, is that the best performers in the world are the most authentic performers. That's what makes them compelling. So if you can move in and out of all these different roles in your life authentically, well, then you'll be compelling. Then you'll steal the show. And the most incredible people are the people who can adopt lots of different styles of behavior. Move from this group into this group into that group. They're comfortable hanging out with the guys working on the dock as well as hanging out in the faculty lounge at the university. They don't feel like they have to know everything about everything, but they can move through different environments because they are very good at connecting with others, which is what performance is about. It's connecting with the people in the room, on the TV, wherever it is you're performing. And after 12 years of writing business books, sales, marketing books, building the School of Coach Training. So we have over 200 certified Book Yourself Solid coaches in 21 countries. The Book Yourself Solid mentoring program, these environments, these communities that run day in and day out, month after month, year after year, people stay in for years at a time. After building them to such a degree where they're stable, they're leveraged, they're scalable, and they're stable, and I've got an incredible team around me, I decided to go back to my roots and start teaching performance again. Public speaking specifically. Because if I look at all the different things I've done, the performance has been the ticket. So obviously, as a professional speaker, that's an obvious example of how it worked. But branding, you're developing a character. You're developing a role that you can play out in the world based on how you want to be seen. So all of these things, I look back and I say, oh my God, all the things I knew about acting, all the techniques, I've been using them. So now why don't I teach people how to perform? So we have a program called the Heroic Public Speaking. We're doing a total immersion program, and then we're doing a live event coming up in February. And we're teaching people how to speak on the stage as performers in a way that they've never experienced before. And it's really quite, I haven't had this much fun in so long.
That's so cool.
So trying to get them to stop speaking and start performing. Because that's what people want to watch today. Let's get out from behind the screen and onto the stage. And that's where many people want to go, but it's scary. If we're sitting at home all day long typing, computer, click, click, typing, computer, click, click, that's a safe place to be.
Absolutely.
Facebook, safe. Twitter, safe. LinkedIn, safe. They're all safe. They're easy. You can go in and delete something that you wrote if you didn't like it. But you can't do that on stage.
Yeah, you can't hide on stage.
No, you can't hide. There's a, I think it's Rosalind, I'll let you know what her last name was, but famous actress from many years ago. said acting is like standing on the stage naked and turning around slowly. And and any kind of performance is, it's petrifying, it's traumatizing.
Yeah.
Because we're so afraid of the criticism. And I get that. I mean, I am. I think most performers find it traumatic. And the more sensitive you are, the more traumatic you're going to find it. And often the more sensitive you are, the more natural you are of a performer, the more of yourself that you have to offer. I'm sure you've heard public speaking coaches give folks the advice that if they're nervous, they should think about the audience in their underwear.
Or naked.
Or naked.
Which is even worse in my mind.
Which is worse. And it could be the single worst piece of advice. Now, if you come out on stage to give a speech and you're really nervous and you think about everybody naked, first of all, I think that's going to make you more uncomfortable. Yeah. Second of all, it's not what you should be thinking about at that moment. So there's all this strange advice out there and very unsophisticated advice, you know, like look people in the eye, tell stories, use your hands. I mean, people know all of these things. Yeah. It's not a question of not knowing these basic things. It's a question of finding your voice and being able to stand in your own power on stage and allow yourself to be transparent. That's what a performer does.
Yeah. It feels like what you're doing, first of all, congratulations on integrating one of your paths into, you know, the version of Michael today. It's always so beautiful. I'm in the middle of one of those too. So I really I love that rich, powerful, poignant feeling when you're like, okay, I get it now. Like I saw how that journey now fits in.
Sure.
But, you know, what you're saying is, it's something that I think is one of the most powerful ways we can be as a speaker is to actually engage, entertain, and create an experience for people rather than just what many of us have been taught. How do I sell the most people in this room on whatever my agenda is?
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Such a, not only is it transformational, but that's where lasting change comes from, is when we can give people an experience that truly makes them want to have more. And I feel like that's what you're saying is you're helping, you've seen how to incorporate that, and now you're helping others learn how to be that way.
Indeed. There's a lot of people who will teach, I guess what's called selling from the stage, you know, selling the products in the back of the room. And I have a very strong principle that I do my best to apply, which is not to be a critic, because I don't think I can be a performer and a critic. I think you can be one or the other.
Yeah.
So if you want to be a critic, but you're not going to be a performer also. Because if you spend your time criticizing, then you know that's coming back to you as soon as you set foot out in the public eye. So I don't criticize. So I say that before I talk about this idea of selling from the stage. So I'm not criticizing anybody, and I think that it's perfectly fair and fine to do. I think that one of the reasons we speak is to create awareness for what we're doing, to book more business. I think that's great. And, you know, when I go there, I want people to go buy the books that are there for sale. But I think that sales offers should be proportionate to the amount of trust that you've earned. And often when people get on stage, they don't realize they're taking advantage of that space. And they're making offers that are not yet proportionate, that are disproportionate to the amount of trust that they've earned. So people don't like it. It doesn't feel so good. And I think that if you're designing a speech with the super objective being to sell expensive products at the back of the room, then you may not be designing the speech in service of the audience. Now, one could argue and say, yes, but I mean, if they buy the program, they're going to get great results, and so I'm being in service of them. I get it. Absolutely, I get it. I have no doubt they will, and I'm with you. But I have seen many speakers miss the opportunity to create truly lasting change in that short period of time because they focused on the sale rather than on the super objective, which is what that particular individual is going to experience, feel, change. And what I have found is that if you're the best in class on the stage, you don't really need to sell a lot. So I gave a speech recently for a company that paid my regular fee, which is $25,000 for a speech. They bought $40,000 worth of books for the people in the room. And then we are still working on it, but we're almost done with the deal. Now, then we're doing a licensing program to put my material into their organization. And I didn't even say go sign up for a newsletter. Nothing. I didn't say a word. So that's a 6-figure engagement with no selling from the stage whatsoever. But best in class from a content perspective, best in class from a performance perspective. You don't need to do some of the things that you might think you need to do to make the sale when you're doing the work that needs to be done. So, for example, if someone comes to a master class and they're having trouble with a speech, or they said, I gave it, but it didn't really feel right, or kind of bombed. You say, well, how many times how often did you rehearse? How long did you rehearse? They said, I rehearsed a lot. I went over it a few times in my head the morning before in the hotel room. So I said, well, that's not rehearsal. Rehearsal is months, right, if you have them, weeks if you only have them, but it's hours and hours and hours and hours of time. So I think about it, and that came from my background as an actor. If you have a performance to give, the stage I have reverence for it. People are a captive audience; they're stuck there. So if when you go to watch a play, they've worked on that for months, every day, 6 days a week, 9 hours a day, rehearsing, just to be ready for opening night. And even on opening night, they're often not ready. They still need weeks and weeks and weeks to really get it. But we go give a speech and we think that just a couple times in our head or just reviewing our slides is prepared. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help people move toward this place of mastery. I can't do the quick fix thing. Like I can't sell that idea that in one day you'll be the best performer in the room. I can, without a doubt, promise that anybody that works with me or Amy, who's my partner, even just 1 hour, they'll never approach it the same way again in their entire life. Now they have to go and work on their material and rehearse and rehearse. And I love that the people who are in this heroic public speaking program, they said 4 months, I'll do it. 4 months, I'll work 6 days a week on the material, and then I'll come and I'll present it. I'll perform it. That's mastery to me, and that's hundreds of people said, yeah, I'm going to do that. And I raised my hand to do that. So that's one of the things I'm trying to push or to encourage. And I feel like we were joking earlier about being second generation in this business. First generation is like Brian Tracy, Tony Robbins, all those guys. And the second generation is us. And then third generation is like Tim Ferriss age, people who came in around that time in 2008 or so. And, we're at the place now where we're not that worried about what people think of us. We have the great fortune to be secure, stable in our work. So we're more comfortable saying, no, this is the way that we're doing it here. If you're here, you're going to do the work. I'm not going to pretend that there's a quick fix so that I can sell it to you, and then you realize that there's actually work. We don't need to do that. We're past all that. And that's a great feeling, but it definitely means that the red velvet rope is really tight. It means that we're pushing some people away. I'm not sure what the point of that was, but
but you brought something up I want to go back to for a second, because
Sure.
you said something that is so powerful, and you're talking about rehearsing. Mm. And what I know is rehearsing makes permanent, correct? Mm-hmm. It's about really creating that automatic, like you just flow with it. So, yeah. But what we know is it has to be effective. Yeah. What you're rehearsing. So I'm wondering, can you share with us what is something that you need to look at in the way you build your speech that you want to make permanent?
So the first thing you've got to decide is the big promise. Mm-hmm. What's the promise of the speech for the audience? And you're making this promise to them. So that means you need to deliver on that promise. So that's first. And is there a big idea that backs up this promise? Mm-hmm. So that's first. The second thing we need to look at is how the world looks to the people in the room right now. That's the first thing we need to introduce, because
So what's their paradigm? What's their reality?
Yeah, they need to know that we get it.
Yes.
Then we need to make sure that we can articulate what the world's going to look like if they don't see the world in this new way. And that's got to be pretty catastrophic. Otherwise, the speech isn't really worth giving.
Yes, and they're not connected to it because they don't know what's in it for them yet.
And then what we do is we introduce, this is the way the world can look. And that's got to be beautiful, beautiful and bright. Because if the truth of the matter is that the world's not going to change that much based on the promise you're making, the promise isn't big enough. Yeah, and to be somebody who really moves people in the room, the promise has got to be really quite big, but you've got to be able to back it up. So, first you look at the promise, then the big idea, then the way the world looks like, then what it's going to look like if you don't adopt this, then what it'll look like if you do. And then you start to look at the structure. Well, how do I introduce this material? And there are different frameworks that you can use. You can take the very simple framework of problem solution. Here are 7 problems that exist right now, and here are 7 solutions. Problem 1, here's how you solve it. Problem 2, here's how you solve it. You can look at a sequential framework. This, then this, then this, then this. You can look at a numerical. Okay, there are 7 rules. There's the rules to follow. So you start to structure your material. And then you start to look at building out that material. And that's when you start to get very creative and have fun and play. And then you start to look at actually how you're going to deliver this. What performance elements are you going to bring into this? What audience interaction elements are you going to bring into this? And it's not something that takes a day. My Think Big Revolution keynote that I do, first time I performed it was at the end of May, and I started working on it in December prior. No, March, sorry. March, so December, January, February, and the end of March. So it's 4 months. And I worked on it probably 5 or 6 days a week that whole period of time. And right now I'm doing another keynote that is going to support the book that I'm writing called Steal the Show, which comes out in the fall of 2015 on this subject. And my partner and I right now are working on that now. You see, now. And we're actually creating, we're working on writing a script, like a play, teaching the book in a play form, where we're actually performing this play and they're seeing the techniques in the book in the scenes. So it's pretty risky, because I don't know if anybody's ever seen a keynote delivered that way. But if the risks are really high, the rewards, if it works, are even higher. So one of the things that performers do is they take big risks. That's what you want to see in a performer. That's what's exciting to see. You got to make big choices early and often. You got to raise the stakes, increase the tension that exists, in that story that you're telling. The more conflict, the more compelling it is to watch. And what you're doing as a performer, as a speaker, is you're really introducing this conflict, but you're also introducing a resolution to it. Mm-hmm. So anytime you tell a story, you think about a story from this perspective. You always introduce the given circumstances. Okay, so there's an old man, a little boy, and a donkey, right? And you start to give the circumstances. A rabbi, a priest, and a monk walk into a bar. Those are the given circumstances. And the same thing works for jokes. Then, number 2, you introduce the conflict. Okay, so a rabbi, a priest, and a monk walk into a bar, and they're out of beer. Now apparently these guys are big beer drinkers. So now they've got a conflict. Is that a big one? Well, maybe for them it is. But then there's got to be a resolution, and the resolution is either not so good or really good. But either way, it's a resolution for the audience. If you look at all stories, they fall into that structure. So when you're working on finding stories, you put them into that structure. And the way you find stories is by looking at either people, places, things, or events. So if I said to you, I want you to think of your high school boyfriend, like your main boyfriend from high school. Okay? Think of him right now. And then, what stories come to mind when you think of your high school boyfriend? Like any particular stories just pop into your mind? You don't have to
not good ones.
No.
Okay.
You don't have to tell me. But what I'm saying is our stories.
But yes, very much they're vivid.
Exactly.
Yes.
So if you wanted to bring some of those stories into your presentations, you could. Now, how about if I say, okay, I want you to think of your first car. What stories pop into your head?
Yeah.
Okay. So people, places, things, and events. And if you put a second, I'm going to think of middle school. What happened? I'm going to think of events. I'm going to think of my bar mitzvah or my confirmation and then you can, we do in the heroic public speaking program, we do a whole section where they just spend a week on finding stories. And what you do is you do this exercise where you sort of brainstorm these different stories, but you just jot what the story is. You don't have to write the whole thing. You go, yeah, the time Aviva poured the strawberry milkshake in the radiator of my car. Okay, I got that one. Now, it's like your bucket of stories. And when you're working on your material, you then go reach into the bucket and you find stories that can apply to the content that you're delivering. And there's two kinds of speeches, really, from the kind of speeches the people who are watching give. There is the curriculum-based speech, and then there is the message-based speech, or the idea-based speech. And of course, a curriculum has a message. It has an idea. But a Seth Godin speech is an idea speech. It's one idea. Tribes. You should have a tribe around you. And then he gives you examples of tribes. Doesn't tell you how to build a tribe, but it's a really interesting speech that's really good and very thoughtful, and you have that idea when you leave. A curriculum-based speech would be like John Jantz teaching duct tape marketing. Okay, you do this, then you do this, then you do this. So if I give a Book Yourself Solid speech, that's a curriculum-based speech. If I give a Think Big Revolution speech, that is a message speech. And doesn't mean that there isn't content in both or messages in both, but you develop them differently, you deliver them differently. And if someone goes, if you go to michaelport.com, you'll see I have, if you scroll down, you'll see there's two videos. One is a 15-minute video of the Think Big Revolution, just a part of it, and the other is 15-minute part of Book Yourself Solid. And I put those two there because they're very different than each other. And you can see the Book Yourself Solid is very curriculum-based in the way that I deliver, and the other is very different. Because what we're trying to do when we give speeches, no matter what kind of speeches we give, we're trying to create a lot of contrast. Contrast is interesting. Sameness is boring. So if you eat a tuna fish sandwich every day for lunch for your entire life, you may get a little bit bored. Some people like that consistency. But if you're watching someone on stage, you don't want to watch them eat a tuna fish sandwich for the whole show. I never used that analogy before. I think I'm going to keep it. You want them to deliver differently. So they're up on stage, they're in the audience, they're using video, they're using their voice. There's so many different ways of delivering, and you create all this different contrast. You have the audience moving, you have them sitting, you have them loud, you have them quiet. All this different contrast. Same thing when you organize your content, contrasting your content. Really, really emotional story to something very, very light. Yeah, to a very prescriptive 3-step process to do this. And then you've got contrast there. And then, of course, there's lots of different contrasts that you can put in, but that's one of the things that makes a speech very interesting is all sorts of contrast. So at the end of Think Big Revolution, I have them dancing. I actually bring in dancers, whatever city I go to, and we have a dance routine that they do.
That's awesome.
And it's fantastic fun. There's another section where they're all up hugging and posing and taking pictures of each other. And then, of course, there's sections where I'm just sitting on the stage very intently telling them a story. Then there's others where I'm moving all over and it's big energy and very dynamic. So it creates contrast. Yeah. And that's what people want to watch. And also vocal contrast. If your voice always sounds like this, you're going to put people to sleep. So vocal contrast, pacing contrast, timing contrast, all of that makes for a really exciting performance. But here's the thing. You don't need to be an actor to do these things. You just need to invest.
It's learning a technique.
That's right. So for me, acting is not a metaphor, for being a good performer. It is a model that we can use, we can adopt, that we can apply to so many different aspects of our life that have a performance element in them.
Yeah. Michael, my greatest takeaway so far, and I love every time we get to talk because there's always a golden nugget that drops in for me. But, I wasn't taught the word contrast in my speaking background, but this idea of contrast is beautiful, and that's going to be my nugget. I'm going to ask everybody as you're listening in today to share your nuggets when we're done. But, Michael, we could go on and on and on about this, and there's so much rich information here, but I think also it would be so interesting to hear a little bit about how you, as an entrepreneur, are learning how to flow with the constant changes and evolutions that you go through. And, I find that we all, as entrepreneurs, there are certain embedded challenges in the journey that each of us face at certain times. What would you be willing to share one of yours?
I would be willing to share anything that comes to mind. I've had many, many challenges along the way, like anybody who lives on this earth has had. So I'm no special or different. And I've just found that most of the problems that I've had in my business were just my personal problems. It just got in the way. Yeah, it just got in the way of doing things. Not just mindset necessarily, although that's definitely relevant. But, if I'm impatient, for example, well, then I might skip some steps or I might neglect to tell my ops director that I've changed something because I want to go in this other direction, and she can't do her job unless she knows what's going on. These are personal problems. They're not, I need a psychiatrist's personal problems, but they are personal problems that interfere with the work.
Yes.
So, let's fix that. To interfere with the work. And so when I look at the things that have held me back, 9 times out of 10, it's been just some, personal problem coming out in the business work. And that's the thing I always have to look at. So when something's not working, I look at myself and I say, what parts of me are influencing this issue that we're having? And then I've got to deal with that. I've got to address that. Because as I've grown larger, I need more and more people working with me. And my responsibility, my role changes. You start as the doer and then you move toward the manager, and then you move, you keep changing your role. And I've had to really check my own needs at the door to do things the way that I want to do them, if I want the best people in the world to work with me. And that's been another thing that I've had to work on and do. But I do feel like the luckiest guy in the world because I feel like I've got the best team in the world. And I always hire people that are smarter than me. And that's not hard to find, really, because I'm not the sharpest tack in the box. But I find people who are incredibly gifted, incredibly skilled, and I like putting them up front. Mm-hmm. So over the years, I've had less need to be the front man. And then you can build a real business if you don't have to always be the front man. But part of the business is being out there, it's part of the brand, but less, I haven't had the need the way that I did when I first started. I'm more interested in results than approval.
Yeah. I love that you brought up personal effectiveness. You called it personal problems, but I look at that because in my experience, the greatest bottleneck to having the business you want is often us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I love that you're talking about how you had to really check yourself and say, am I being the best at this that I can be? And is there places that I could do it better? Yeah. Because I think more people, if they really would assess that part of their life and their business, you can be unstoppable.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing I think, now that you push a little more on it, the thing really is I had to give up really caring what people thought. Mm-hmm. And that's such an interesting dynamic because I'm in the business of being in service to others.
Yes.
So I care deeply about the people I serve. I care deeply about their thoughts and their ideas and their dreams and how we serve them. I'm crushed if someone feels like we're not serving them brilliantly. But that's different than caring about the critics. It's very different.
Yeah.
So I still feel it. I'm a super sensitive kind of person, so I still feel it if somebody's critical. But I just care less and less each day. And I have more important things to worry about, like people I love, my family, my dreams, those kinds of things. And one of the things that's so interesting about the world in which we live is there's 9 billion people in the world, but we think that just a few people around us are the ones who write on our Facebook pages or something are the only people whose voices matter. So I just think that, you got to look at the world at a little bit bigger sometimes and get out of that disclosive space, that little space that you hide in where the voices are really loud from some people and those voices are critical. Well, those are just a couple people. Now, maybe they're your mother or your father, but they're still just 2 people out of the 9 billion. They happen to have a similar DNA to you, but they're still just 2 people out of the 9 billion. So their opinions are not necessarily right.
Yeah. It's beautiful. It's funny. One of my greatest healings as an entrepreneur and as a person is really learning the distinction between having empathy and caring for people and needing approval in order to fulfill on my destiny and my purpose.
Right
on. That was just extraordinary shifts. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. I still get caught up in it. But
that's a really nice way of thinking about it. I really like the way you express that. That's cool.
Yeah. So let's wrap up with, do you have a favorite mantra or quote that keeps you inspired and really wanting to play big?
Yes, I have a lot of those. This particular quote is not one that necessarily gets me thinking bigger, but it gets me more focused.
Yes, okay.
So Winston Churchill said that it's a mistake to look too far ahead. Only one link in the chain of destiny can be handled at a time.
Ooh, juicy one.
And for somebody who's impatient, it's good for me to remember this.
Yes.
I build one link in the chain of destiny at a time. And sometimes if we feel that we want to skip building all of the chain links, then we feel like we're never going to get there because the leap is too big. But we need these chain links to create this strong bond, from where we are, between where we are now and where we want to go. And once you get there to where you want to go and that chain link, those chain links are so strong, you feel so good about yourself, feel so secure. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I love it. That's a great one. So Michael, let's share with everybody how they can find out more about heroic public speaking. And I know when the book comes out, you'll be sharing more about that. But let's at least get them hooked up with how to dig deeper into this amazing program that you have.
Sure. So heroicpublicspeaking.com offers a free download of 50 tips that you can't afford to ignore if you want to be a better public speaker. So you can go get that free.
And by the way, I've read that and it's very, very good.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, I pretty much can. I feel like nobody's ever said that I was wrong. So I feel like I can pretty much guarantee that there's at least some things in those 50 tips that you've never thought of.
Yep.
I never thought about it that way about speaking. So there's something in there for everybody, even if you have a lot of experience. And then at michaelport.com is an opportunity to see all the different things we do. Everything from the Book Yourself Solid School of Coach Training to the Book Yourself Solid Mentoring Program to those videos that I mentioned earlier. And if anybody's out there who wants me to come and speak to their organization, they can also learn about that there.
And Michael is amazing. Seen him speak before. Always great power in the room. And, I always leave with at least 5 or 10 new nuggets, which is what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you're listening in today, first of all, I just appreciate you. I know that my whole desire is that I bring you guests who can really transform the way you're thinking and help you power up from the inside out, really help you see a more effective way to get the job done, if you will. And I'd love to hear, what's the takeaway from today? Was there a nugget that you heard from Michael that you're like, wow, okay, I'm just going to put this one thing into action, go get the tips, the 50 tips on heroic public speaking. What's a tip that you really engage? Come share it on the show page at melaniebensonstrick.com. Just head over to the blog, and if you don't see Michael's interview right up there, just type in Michael Port and just come share with us what you're taking away from today. I know both Michael and I would love to hear you share what's been instrumental for you today. And, of course, come back next week. We'll have another great show for you. So here's to optimizing your business so it performs so much more effortlessly. Bye, everybody. Bye, Michael. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.